Thank you so much for staying with us. This morning we have with us to discuss one of the issues, lined up for us this morning. The appointment of the chiefs of the anti-corruption agencies, the ICPC and the EFCC. We have with us here this morning Mr. Wahab Shitu, who is a senior advocate of Nigeria. Thank you so much for joining us this morning.
Again, my pleasure to be here.
Let's begin with... I don't want to call it the elephant in the room because I don't think it's so big anymore. Before we go to the issue of the EFCC, the ICPC chairman that's just been appointed or announced by the president, awaiting confirmation by the Senate. What do you make of all of the furore over the qualification or not of the EFCC chairman?
Well, I think, in my view, our focus this time around is how to rebuild the economy, how to advance our democracy, how to raise living standards, and how to support this president to deliver on his mandate. And so we should not allow for distractions at this point in time. And I'm saying that because the job of nation building is a dynamic process. If our law itself operates for the benefit of the society. And so when we take a view, we should look at the overall objectives. For instance, I've seen a lot of debate by eminent jurists over this furore that has been generated over the appointment of the new chairman of EFCC. I've read the views and I've listened to my very erudite friend, Daniel Buala. I've also listened to Mande Ubani. In fact, my senior friend, Femi Falana, has also expressed their views. All these are views in the public space because of their patriotic concerns. But my own perspective is to look at the EFCC Act itself as a broad legislation. What is the EFCC Act designed to achieve? The EFCC Act is designed to combat corruption, economic and financial crimes. And when we are talking of economic and financial crime, it has a lot of perspectives. We are talking of investigation. We are talking of intelligence gathering. We are talking of prosecution. We are talking of deployment of technical assistance. We are talking of international cooperation. So because corruption is not just local, it's an international thing. And so the focus should be who can do the job, who can deliver on all of these mandates. When we were talking of the appointment of the chairman, not issues about whether somebody is qualified or not qualified. Of course, as far as the appointment of this recent person is concerned, the issue of qualification is not even there because the man is eminently qualified.
So all of those issues being raised by Mr. Buala that you listen to, you don't see?
Mr. Buala's view focuses on literal interpretation of a statute, using the ordinary words employed by the draftsman in construing a statute. The question to ask is there the only method of interpreting a statute? Of course, Mr. Buala will also agree with me that is literal interpretation of statutes is not the only option that we available to anyone who wants to interpret a statute. We have the literal interpretation of statute. We have the golden rule of interpretation. We have the mischief rule of interpretation. Of course, we also have the purposive approach to interpretation of statutes or constitutional provisions, which looks at the overall legislative intent, the overall objective of the enactment, the purpose the enactment was enacted to serve. Now, if you look at it in all these broader contexts, will you say a lawyer is not concerned about investigation? is not concerned about prosecution. It's not concerned about law enforcement. He's a law enforcement officer. And again, the approach is that we also must agree with the fact that in this dispensation, we are blessed with an Attorney General of the Federation that is seasoned, that is experienced, that is exposed, that is bold, and that has a track record. I don't see the president of this country taking a decision to appoint the chairman of EFCC without consulting with the Attorney General.
So all those arguments...
So the Attorney General of the Federation has spoken in favor of the appointment. Because I assume that that kind of appointment cannot... I even sought audience with him, and he confirmed that he was consulted, and that he is in support of the appointment.
So all those conversations or arguments about cognate experience...
Okay, we are talking of cognate experience. Will you say Olukoyede, Olukoyede, a seasoned fraud expert, consultant, somebody who has served as a chief of staff in that law enforcement agency, somebody who has served as secretary to the commission in that law enforcement agency? And let me also make a clarification. Olukoyede was never indicted. In the same way, Ibrahim Magu was never indicted in that panel. Did you see the report? Did you see any white paper? No one was indicted. It was just a needless exercise.
So how about the suspension 2 times along with the manager?
That suspension, if you are suspended pending investigation, and then you are eventually cleared, where is the issue? I'm aware that Olukoyede has been cleared of any complicity, of any allegation, and I'm saying it publicly. The office of the Chief of Staff and Secretary to the has cleared Olukoyede of any complicity. But my worry is not even the appointment of Olukoyede. My worry is about frequent changes in the appointment of chairman of anti-graft agency. We send, very negative signals, and I think the government should worry about it.
We'll definitely come to that because that.
But as for qualification,
yes.
As for qualification, Olukoyede is eminently qualified. He's a lawyer of 22 years standing, and that is his focus area. He's an expert in intelligence gathering. It is an expert in investigation. In the combat of corruption. So I don't see any issue. The issue is, of course, the man who is acting has also delivered to court. And I believe people like that also should be carried along by Olukoyede. Olukoyede should come there to EFCC to carry everybody along and reward those officers who are daily making a lot of sacrifices to ensure that we combat corruption.
Well, you talked about the frequent changes,
yes.
and there's, while we were having the conversation yesterday, my colleague Maokwe was pointing to the fact that, was it Mr. Monday Obani was saying that both the appointment and exit of the chairman of the EFCC have almost always been laden with one, rift, one confusion, one argument, such as we are having now, or the other. But talking about the exits of his predecessors, what are the slippery slopes that he should avoid? How exposed is he or rather, I think I've asked you this question again, this question before. How vulnerable or exposed is the office of the chairman of the EFCC in particular? We'll come to the ICPC shortly. That makes it so easy for them to fall into these traps, that had made it easy for them to fall into these traps until now. And how do we ensure that this doesn't happen again sustainably?
The law of financial inducement and the character of the person. I think mainly we have all these frequent changes, not necessarily because these individuals, some of them are compromised. No. It has to do with vested interest of the ruling elite. For instance, how committed is the ruling elite itself to the fight against corruption beyond lip service? You cannot fight corruption. There's no political will on the part of the leadership. So every EFCC chairman who wants to survive must read the body language of the ruling elite. You understand? It's a survival thing. It's just like, for instance, if for instance, look at channels. The way channels is professionally and efficiently run. Because John Momo, your chairman, offers a free hand to all of you to do your job professionally. That is what should happen. The president and those should give the chairman of EFCC or free hand to operate.
So let me just make this.
The question is, are they giving free hand?
You have operated within the system for a while. So
yes. Since inception, I've been there, so I know.
Quite valid.
Yes.
Your opinion is quite valid here.
Yes.
So when you say the ruling elite,
yes,
you definitely aren't talking about just the president.
Yes, I'm talking about those in charge of the decision-making process, those who are around the president and those around him, the legislature, the leadership of the legislature, and what they want. What are their interests? I think we have gotten to a situation where we must take a firm stand. Are we ready to fight corruption? If the answer is yes, then all those empowered with the duty to fight corruption must be supported, must be encouraged. For instance, I wouldn't pray for Olukoyede to come in, only to be shoved aside in very, controversial circumstances.
If that happens, does that demonstrate to you that we are not fighting corruption or we are not committed to it? I
think it demonstrates to me clearly that we are not committed to it. For instance, I'm not saying that the headship of the anti-graft agency should be corrupt. No. If the headship of the anti-graft agency is corrupt, that sends a very dangerous signal. What I'm saying is that we must be certain that the headship is corrupt on proven allegations. Not because we want to shove anybody aside. For instance, I say it publicly. What allegation of corruption has been proved against Ibrahim Magu? I can say it for free. That man is one of the most, in terms of commitment to ideals, he's not corrupt. Ibrahim Magu is not corrupt. In the same way, Nuhu Ribadu is not corrupt. Those were elements who fought corruption with passion. And they were shoved aside. And we kept quiet. No white paper, nothing. And we kept quiet. So you understand what I'm saying? I told you, I appeared before Honorable Justice Salami Pane. And I threw an open challenge when I said my appearance for Magu was conditional. That if you show me proof that this man is corrupt, this minute I will withdraw my appearance. I repeated the challenge 3 times. Even at the conclusion of the proceeding, when I was addressing the panel, there was no allegation of corruption against Magu. That man was just innocently punished. Was just punished for doing his duty. You might say Magu was high-handed. You might say he didn't deliver in terms of welfare of staff, which are also critical. But nobody can accuse him of corruption. You understand what I'm saying? In the same way, you cannot accuse anybody of corruption. But what I'm saying is that this president, having appointed Olukoyede as chair of EFCC, must support him to deliver.
I'm glad that you mentioned the other time that you checked with your colleague, who is the Attorney General of the Federation.
Yes, I checked
now, and
I checked with him. I sought to deal with him. The Attorney General of the Federation,
qualified.
Lateef Agbemi is here. Yes. And he okayed the appointment of Olukoyede.
Now,
and as the Chief Law Officer of the Federation, I stand by his decision. If you believe that what the Chief Law Officer of the Federation has said is wrong, go to court. But I think, and the court will interpret. And it's not just the literary rule of interpretation that is available to the judges. We have the golden rule of interpretation. We have the mischief rule of interpretation that looks at the mischief that the legislation intends to remedy. and then address it. And of course, we have the purposive rule of interpretation. You don't just look at Section 2 in isolation of the rest of. What is the EFCC Act 2004 designed to achieve? To combat economic and financial crimes. Are you saying a lawyer is eminently not qualified? A lawyer understands all the terrain. He understands investigation. He understands prosecution. He understands adjudication. He understands the best practices about combating corruption. So it's not just look at that. I've looked at Section 2 of the EFCC Act.
Okay. So one thing that, I mean, you've spoken about this quite laudably, but let's bring in the entire, because it would seem like the federal government listened to your colleague, Mr. Femi Falana, when he talked about the Federal Character Commission, Federal Character Principle, that it has to come in, there has to be a balance. Are you satisfied with the appointment of the new chairman of the ICPC?
Well, for geographical balance, because let us face it, the entire 6 geopolitical zones in the country have people that are eminent, capable, of character to deliver. So appointments into public offices ought not to be lopsided. Apart from this, the man, Professor Bolaji Owosoye, whose tenure is about, has done very well in ICPC. One of the most cerebral minds that you can think about.
But there are those who thought.
But you see, if Olukoyede is coming to EFCC and he's from the south, it doesn't make sense to also have the leader of the ICPC come from the south.
Okay.
You understand me?
Okay.
Because we have eminent people all over the place. But I want to salute Professor Bolaji Owosoye for his stellar performance in the ICPC.
Okay.
And I believe that young man, I won't say young man, is my oga.
Okay.
His services ought to be deployed elsewhere because he's a cerebral, competent person.
Well, let me believe that.
And Adamu Aliyu is coming in.
Yeah. Okay.
He's also very competent because he's a senior advocate of Nigeria. You don't rise to the inner bar if you are not qualified.
Okay.
Again, if you see the ICPC, which is also agency, and there's no furore about the appointment of the ICPC chairman, why should there be furore about that of the EFCC?
Okay, my colleagues in Abuja have questions for you.
Yes.
Chamberlain.
Well, yes, good morning. We'll come to you much later, but we've got Ms. Adebayo Ojo, who is a senior advocate of Nigeria as well, also a former Attorney General and Commissioner for Justice for Oyo State. He joins us virtually. Good morning, Mr. Ojo. Thank you for joining us on the program today.
Good morning, Chairman.
Well, do you still... I know Mr. Shitu has copiously said that all of this talk about qualification of the ICPC, the EFCC chair is needless because he says the man is eminently qualified, period.
I quite disagree with my learned brother, Mr. Wabisitu, on that point. I also disagree with Mr. Femi Falana and Chief Ubani, who was your program yesterday. And let me say this, I give kudos to Daniel Bwala. He ably, can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes. Mr. Daniel Bwala did justice to that provision of the law when he appeared on your program yesterday, and I adopt all he said as mine. And let me say this, I'm happy that Mr. Wabisitu, SAN, has made its disclosure because he represented the new chairman, the new acting chairman of EFCC before the Justice panel when some of them were being investigated, including former chairman, Mr. Ibrahim Magu. And all of us know who Justice Isa Solami is. He is one of the most incorruptible justices or jurists this country has ever produced. Look, let me ask. The positions of the law are very clear. The first leg of that act is that you must be either a serving or retired member of any security or law enforcement agency, who must not be less than the rank of the ACP. If you are talking of or is equivalent, in equivalent, you have equivalent of the rank of ACP in the military. You will have also the equivalent in NIA or in all other security agencies. No. What are we talking about? Are you now saying because the man served as the company secretary of EFCC, he is now qualified or is deemed to have possessed that level of qualification as required by the law? The answer certainly is no. And I'll give an example. An accountant or a director of finance and admin in the Ministry of Justice, no matter the level of experience,
Okay, Mr. Joe, we have a little challenge with your connection. We're hoping that we'll be able to sort it. But let me ask you, hoping that this goes through and you can hear us clearly. When Mr. Shitu started, concerning the second point you had made previously, he said that Mr. Olukoyede was never indicted. And you have said, we can quote you, that the man was indicted.
He was indicted by Isabel panel. But one thing I know is that no white paper has been issued by the government, but he was indicted. To say that he was not indicted is far from the truth. And it's just being a commander of the truth.
Okay. I beg your pardon. On that particular point, I need to double check again with Mr. Shitu because...
Did he retire or resign from EFCC? Did Mr. Olukoyede retire or resign from EFCC? He was unceremoniously put out. Or shown the way out of EFCC. Did he retire? Did he resign?
Okay, let's pose that question to Mr. Shitu. Mr. Shitu, could you address that directly?
Mr. Olukoyede was never indicted by the panel. Mr. Olukoyede appeared before the panel as a witness. He was never on trial. And at the end of it, before his appearance, he alongside some other people, top officials of EFCC, were suspended pending the outcome of investigation. Mr. Ojo, for whom I have a lot of respect, knows that in a panel of inquiry, what is central is the white paper. You cannot even sue the panel for any pronouncement. You can only sue on the basis of the white paper. As we speak today, there's no white paper, so there you cannot talk of any indictment. I was privy to the proceedings of the panel. I was there for almost 3 months. And
since the white paper has not been published, we cannot say he was indicted.
Yes. And then his suspension, he has been cleared of any suspension. He has been administratively cleared.
How did he leave the office?
No, he was on suspension.
How did he leave the office?
He was on suspension pending the outcome of the panel. He was never sacked. He was never dismissed.
So,
if, for instance...
If there hadn't been... Yeah,
if an inquiry is going on and they say, okay, pending the outcome of that inquiry, certain persons are suspended. I'm aware that all the officers, some of the officers, suspended at the time, have been recalled. In the case of Olukoyede, while the suspension was pending, another fellow was appointed as the secretary to the commission in the prerogative of the administration. So he was never indicted. His records are clean, in the same way the records of Ibrahim Magu are clean. And I challenge anyone to say to the contrary, where is any white paper? Where is any indictment? I don't think we should rely on speculation.
All right.
And when we are talking of reputations of individuals, we should be very careful. It can be anybody.
Okay, we'll go to break. When we return, I reckon Mr. Ojo will pick up the gauntlet as you've challenged him. So Stay on with us, everyone. Welcome back. So, Mr. Ojo, Mr. Shitu had challenged you, saying no such indictment, on the contrary to what you had said.
And I stand by my position. But let me say this. The only point of convergence between me and Mr. Shitu is that this country is blessed presently with the kind of Attorney General of the Federation we have and the Minister of Justice in person of Mr. Prince Lateef Fagbemi is the best the country can get at this time. Because Mr. Fagbemi's appointment is a fitting one. He's not a man given to sentiment or emotion. He's a thoroughbred professional who I'm sure we really deal with this issue. And I believe me, and let me say this, that the Attorney General of the Federation, Mr. Lateef Fagbemi, we take care of this matter holistically. And if Mr. Olukoyede appointment is confirmed, then it means that the Attorney General of the Federation, Mr. Lateef Fagbemi, has the better of that appointment. And I abide by it. Because I know him. He's a man who cannot be compromised under any circumstance.
But Mr. Ojo, the matter is, he's a public officer. It's in public service, so the public deserves to know if the right things were done.
No, Mr. Lateef Fagbemi is an Attorney General for the people. That's what an Attorney General should be. He's an Attorney General for the people. He cannot be a mouthpiece of any government. He will get the government rightly.
When you say that he was indicted, Mr. Olukoyede, so the impression people will then have is, okay, he was indicted, and then since the white paper has not been issued, does it then mean that upon that issuance of the white paper, they will then issue how indicted, because now that he's in this position, will there still be a white paper?
Chamberlain, let me say this. Mr. Shitu said Mr. Olukoyede only appeared before that panel as a witness. And I asked him, how did he leave? If he was a mere witness, how did he leave EFCC? Did he retire or did he resign? He should tell us that. Did he retire or did he resign?
He said he was suspended.
If he was just a mere witness, with me, he was never on trial, just like Magu. Then how did he leave? Yes, in what circumstance did he leave EFCC? That's the issue, and which he needs to clear and tell us. Because we should place all the facts on the table.
Okay, just one more thing on this matter for Mr. Shitu. If you say, Mr. Shitu, this for you now, if you say that he appeared as a witness, he was suspended, there isn't any white paper, but part of the natural question too will then be, if he was cleared, as you say he was he reinstated? If he wasn't reinstated and being cleared, why wasn't he reinstated?
Thank you very much. Mr. Olukoyede never resigned his appointment. He was never indicted. What happened? A lot of illegality took place in the last regime. Okay, for instance, Magu that was suspended was never retired, was never dismissed. You know by public knowledge that he was eventually promoted from his status as Commissioner of Police to Assistant Inspector General of Police. And he retired by virtue of the fact that his tenure, his statutory age of retirement elapsed. So the question you should ask as a lawyer is, for instance, why would somebody who is suspended as chairman of EFCC and his suspension has not been converted to dismissal or retirement, why would they appoint Abdulrasheed Bawal while that suspension is still subsisting? You understand what I'm saying? Those are illegalities that cannot be attributed to this regime. And it's not something that can be attributed to Mr. Lateef Fagbemi, Honorable Attorney. I agree with you that Mr. Lateef Fagbemi is eminently qualified. And the government would not have made this appointment if he did not sanction it. He's the Attorney General of the Federation. And I know, I have it on good authority that he sanctioned the appointment. He stands by the government on this appointment. And like you know, Mr. Lateef Fagbemi will not still be in government. He will have thrown in the towel if he doesn't agree with this. So I want to believe, and I believe, that Mr. Lateef Fagbemi has looked at the law from a broader perspective. I listened to Daniel Bwala, made very erudite submissions, basing his submission largely on the literary rule of interpretation. But that is not the only rule of interpretation available to the Judas. We have the golden rule, Mr. Ojo is aware. We have the mischief rule. We have the purposive rule of interpretation, where what you look at is the overall legislative intent. You look at the function the EFCC Act is designed to perform. Function of investigation, function of prosecution, intelligence gathering, law enforcement, prevention of corruption, and all those. And you say a lawyer is not qualified to do all of that? A lawyer who has served in the... And you talk of cognate experience. If you look at Section 2, 15 years cognate experience. Did it say 15 years cognate experience in that security organization? No, it's a cognate experience. Olukoyede is over 22 years post-call experience as a lawyer. Mr. Ojo is qualified to head the EFCC. The man talking, the lawyer there. I know him very well. He's qualified to head it. So a lawyer is qualified to head the EFCC. And if you look at it in relation to all other legislation like the ICPC Act, a lawyer has just been appointed.
Can you hear me, Mr. Shitu?
So I think we should, in construing a statute, we should look at...
Mr. Magu was reinstated and promoted.
Promoted?
In the EFCC, wasn't he?
No, it wasn't brought back to the EFCC.
Police.
The police.
The police.
Yes. He's not the assistant. At the time of his trial, he was a commissioner of police. Today, he's an assistant inspector general of police, with his integrity intact.
So why then the same thing happened to Mr. Olukoyede?
Olukoyede came in as a private illegal practitioner. What he was doing all the while is to clear his name.
No,
I can also tell you for free.
Why wasn't he reinstated?
Yes. He has been given a clean bill of health by the office of the Chief of Staff, the Secretary of the Federation. I'm telling you, I spoke to him, and I can tell you for free that he has been given a clean bill of health.
Was that made public?
If under the Freedom of Information Act, you can make your inquiries. And I tell you, President Ahmed Bola Tinubu would not have appointed him if he still remains indicted. He was never indicted. No white paper. I don't think we should rubbish reputations of people who offer themselves for public service without justifiable reasons.
All right.
Well, we understand that, this matter has now been, taken before a court of law. I do not know whether Mr. Ojo thinks that this is the way to go, given the controversy that has now greeted this matter. Some people think, look, shouldn't we just be more straightforward on these matters and avoid litigation on controversial matters? Or do you think that this is good to expand the scope? Maybe this is going to enrich the pool from which we can pick the heads of these agencies. Mr. Ojo, you first, and I'll take Mr. Shitu's response to it. Can you hear me?
I can hear you.
Yeah, I was asking, I said this matter has now been taken before a court of law. It's now being presented before a court of law by a lawyer like yourselves. And some people are saying that this matter, the fact that it has to go to litigation to settle this controversy has its pros and cons. What's your take on it?
Not all matters will be brought to court. That litigation is needless. It's most unnecessary. We should have allowed the Honorable Attorney General of Federation to deal with it. Because if Fagbemi is eminently qualified, and more than qualified. to sort out this issue. And I believe, and I'm convinced that that whatever is ultimate decision on this matter will be acceptable to all and speak, considering his antecedent, because he's a man of unquestionable integrity, impeccable integrity. He's above board. Really.
You are saying that on the assumption that he's not been involved, because Mr. Shitu says he has it on good authority that he's been consulted on this.
What I'm saying is this: that discussion is needless. It is not necessary. Your lawyers are hiding. To me, they are medical interlopers. Why must we want to court over that matter? In a matter of weeks, the AGF will come out and state the position. And believe me, nobody among all of us that have been discussing this issue, this subject matter, is as experienced as Lateef Fagbemi. None of us has his experience and has his depth of knowledge. Nobody can match him among all of us that will be discussing this issue. So why can't we wait and let us hear his opinion? And I said this, that Fagbemi said the appointment is in order. I abide by it because I know his antecedent. It's not a man give it to free authorities. It's not a man give it to sentiment and he cannot be compromised. He cannot. He will have looked at the law and state the right position of the law. I will abide by whatever decision that. No, that is needless. People are just seeking for attention.
It's interesting. I mean, if it has generated this level of controversy, dividing lawyers almost. I mean, you can find you'll find almost as many lawyers who are for it as against it. You don't think that the court should interpret Section 2 once and for all?
No, Mope. Before you rush to court or before you fight, you don't rush to court. As that person as that plaintiff or the lawyer for that case, as he approach, as he related to the attorney general to inform him or to say that this appointment, I don't agree with it, this should be done, A, B, C, and C. No, you don't do that. You don't be gone. That's what you call ADR. That's why we are not making progress in our court. Some frivolous cases would not be there. That's why the court docket are clogged. And one of us will blame the judiciary for not being up and doing, whereas we are the problems, lawyers. Of what essence that? Why must any lawyer go to court over this issue that can be resolved over a round table? This will involve as so narrow. It is whether it's only one section, not one subsection of that section 2, whether Mr. Olukoyede is, by virtue of his work as the Home Secretary of EFCC in the past, is qualified to be considered a serving or retired member of law enforcement agency with equivalent to the rank of SCP. Pure and simple. If he is, so be it. And if he's not, he's out. So why must somebody now file unnecessary litigation? For what? To what end? To what purpose? I don't agree with that. I don't practice my law in that manner. That's why I said some people just hide it.
Mr. Shitu, do you agree with Mr. Ojo on this particular matter?
Ojo is entitled to his views, and I have a lot of respect for him. I just want to say that the president would not have made this kind of sensitive appointment without consulting with the Attorney General of the Federation. And I believe the Attorney General of the Federation, eminent Mr. Lateef Fagbemi, is in agreement with the president on the appointment of Olukoyede. If he is not in agreement, he will have said so publicly. And I'm saying it for free.
Do you think that we should be requesting a statement on that on this particular, since it has generated such a huge controversy?
No, the Attorney General
has been drawn into this debate as to the legality or otherwise. But I think more pointedly, the question I'm asking is about, whether you think that the courts of law should have been invited into this matter. Do you think that this is certainly the way to go about it?
Well, anybody who approaches the court to ventilate his grievances over any subject matter is adopting a constitutional and democratic, approach. I will not condemn anybody for going to court to seek interpretation. And that will not be something outside what is proper under a democratic tradition. you can approach the court. But what I'm saying is that when we want to interpret any statutory provision, we should not just adopt the literary rule. There are other vehicles of interpretation, including the purposive approach to look at the entire legislative intent in order to discover whether a particular statutory provision is correctly interpreted or not. And I want to say it publicly that we should not indict the reputations of individuals without proof. I also want to mention it.
All right,
publicly. Yeah, let me mention this, and it's very important. We all know that Honorable Justice Ayo Salami is eminent. I have a lot of respect for him as former president of the Court of Appeal. And I think majority of Nigerians also have respect for him. Unfortunately, this report, no white paper. And so we don't even have the report anywhere. So we cannot say Justice Salami spoke one way or the other. And for my eminent my colleague, Mr. Ojo, he wasn't in the panel. I was in the panel. I was there for 3 months. I represented Magu. I followed the entire proceedings. And I know that Olukoyede was never on trial throughout the panel. He was invited as a witness to make certain clarifications, which he made. And he was never indicted.
All right, so as we wind down, I mean, if the records are there for everyone to read, I mean, it's as good as being there. That's why there are records.
Yes.
You know, so, but let me ask Mr. Ojo just one more thing as we wrap up all of this matter, just about some of the narratives we hear that INEC is complaining that the courts, several cases in the courts are hindering them, their quest to have a smooth, credible elections for the forthcoming Kogi, Imo, and Bayelsa elections. Is this something that we all should be concerned about? Because we hear that, I mean, time and again, INEC raises these matters, questions about the courts, how they want the courts to be of huge help to them. Mr. Ojo?
The INEC largely focused to complain. That complaint by INEC is misplaced. INEC has done its bit. You've conducted election. So the next stage, you can't deny people access to justice. They have the right to ventilate their grievances in court. And like some people say, you can't slap a child and you don't expect him to cry. That's not possible. You've done your bit. Allow the judge to do your bit. It's like a judge who has a different judgment, maybe at the trial court, and who is now complaining that why are they taking my judgment to the court of appeal? It's their consumer right. So INEC has performed its statutory role, which is to conduct the election and declare results. So the next step, those who are aggrieved have to approach the court to ventilate their grievances and file petitions within the time prescribed by the law. And it's also for the judiciary, for the executive tribunal, either to have or put that election, or order a rerun, or to declare the winning party, the winning candidate. As look at what happened in the case of Senator Ishaq Abu.
All right.
He was sacked by the panel, and the person was declared a rightful winner of that election. So INEC complaint in this wise is most unnecessary. It's misplaced.
All right.
And I would call it a mere lamentation behind it.
All right, Mr. Adebayo Joe, Senior Advocate of Nigeria, thank you for your time this morning.
Thank you for having me.
Ayo.
Well, thank you, Chamberlain. Your last words on this. You wanted to make a statement about the ICPC. There are those who feel that it had been benign until now. We can do this in just a few seconds, maybe about 30 seconds or thereabout. There are those who think that ICPC had been benign and that the EFCC had to come on board because the ICPC wasn't as biting, as strong, as active as it was under Justice Akombi.
Well, you see, ICPC has a statutory mandate, and it has its own way of operations. I can tell you that ICPC has been as effective, just like EFCC, particularly under Professor Bolaji Owasonye. But for geographical balance, and because its tenure is about to expire, we need to bring in another hand. And Adamu Aliyu, by his pedigree, I think we also raise the stakes higher.
Okay.
So I wish him the very best of luck. And I think to the government, our commitment to the fight against corruption must be total. Emphasis now should be on asset recovery, because a lot of our funds, our money, our commonwealth has been stolen, and we need to recover them.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for your time this morning. Mr. Wahab Shitu is a senior advocate of Nigeria. Thank you so much for your time.
It's my pleasure.
We're back right after now to look at what we need to do, as we have looked at what needs to be done in the fight against corruption. How about our elections? At 12 when we return.